Okay, so I am very pleased to welcome to the Chart Speaker Series Mary Czerwinski, who is a research manager of the Human Understanding and Empathy Group at Microsoft Research. And her latest research focuses primarily on behavior change and intervention design, on health and wellness for individuals and productivity at work. Her research background is in visual attention and multitasking, and she holds a PhD in cognitive psychology from Indiana University in Bloomington. And you worked with Rich Schifrin, Mary? Is that correct?
Can you hear me?
I didn't hear you then.
Oh, I'm
now I hear you.
Okay, I'm not muted, so yes.
Okay. I was asking if you worked with Rich Schifrin?
Yes.
Okay. Right. Yes, I thought so. And you received the ACM Sig Chi Lifetime Service Award and was inducted into the Chi Academy and received the Distinguished Alumni Award from Indiana University's College of Arts and Sciences. Mary is a fellow of the ACM and the American Psychological Science Association. And I met Mary years and years ago when we were both in Houston, Texas. So it's great to see you again, Mary.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you so much. And I apologize for all the little glitches we had. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. So please just give me feedback when you can see it. Can you all see that?
Yes.
And can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. All right, it is my pleasure today to be talking about technologies for promoting emotional resilience and well-being. And obviously, I couldn't have done any of this work without my amazing team, the HUE team, and you have all their names listed right there. A large shout out goes to Daniel McDuff in particular, because he really helped us with the emotional sensing side of the house and continues to do so today. But now everybody's working together on these projects. So the agenda for today will simply be, I'll give you a little bit of overview because we've been working in this area for a really long time. I've been working in the productivity space for 25 years at Microsoft. So there's tons of stuff I can talk about, but I won't do that because it would inundate you. But I'll talk about why we think stress is an important thing to focus on, in addition to focusing. And then we'll talk about digital interventions. I'll talk about Sensei, our emotion sensing platform that we've built, and the kinds of applications that we've built on top of it. And then I'm going to highlight two of our more recent projects, Meeting Coach, Effective Spotlight, and I even threw in last night, I threw a couple of slides on a project we did 2 years ago called Pocket Skills that's coming back to the forefront today because of all the mental health issues that are surfacing due to COVID. And of course, because we work in the space of effective computing, it can be misused. And so I'll talk briefly about what we're doing around ethics in this area. So why stress and productivity at work? Well, we've always, Microsoft as a company, their mission statement is to make everyone on the planet achieve more, to help everybody on the planet achieve more. And so in my group, we've always been focused on productivity. But what happens is, as you start looking at the ebb and flow of work during the day, you actually start to see that the things that get in the way of productivity are usually the inability to focus, which leads to stress, because you start stressing out that you're not getting things done. So what we set out to do was to build an affect sensing platform that could be used to design and build emotionally sentient systems, services, and agents. What that means is noticing how your emotions are changing throughout the day and helping you understand those changes so that you can really be your best self given the ebb and flow of your focus, your productivity, your stress, your tiredness, even your frustration. So we believe systems that understand that can actually help you better. And we've got lots of evidence that shows that. And I don't care which study you cite, I've got a link to one here. It doesn't really matter. Every study that's ever been written about stress at work will tell you that it costs our economy a tremendous amount of money. It costs Microsoft a tremendous amount of money. Stress and mental health issues are the #1 most costly thing that we have to deal with in our employee base. And therefore, the same can be said of our customers that we sell software to. So this is important. In fact, tomorrow morning at 5:30 in the morning, I'm leading a discussion with our Fortune 5,000 or 500 customer CIOs on this very topic because it's so costly to them. So what's happening is because mental health problems are a leading cause of disability, affecting so many people, people want or expect Microsoft to do something about it in their products. And our own corporation wants to do something about it. I think during COVID, 1 in 5 people now is suffering from a major mental health problem, according to HR. So we set out to build this affect sensing platform so that we could help with both good and bad stress. We understand that everybody needs some kind of stress. That's when you get your most productive work done. So there is use stress, which is good stress, and we want to protect that. But we do recognize that people need help learning coping skills for when they're experiencing chronic bad stress. So the way we've done these studies over the last, I would say, decade, and most of this work has been with Shamsi Iqbal and Gloria Mark, a very close colleague of ours from UC Irvine. We usually get, approximately 40 information workers. These days, we get more like 100 information workers. We used to always slap some kind of hardware device on them, some wearable that would allow us to track things like sleep, heart rate, things like that. We also do a litany of personality profiling, where we look at the big 5, typically, personality factors. We look for major stressors. So there are really good, well-validated questionnaires out there on major life stress events, or even the PANAS or the PHQ-9, which are very standard tools that even your general practitioner doctor now uses when you come in for your annual review, your annual checkup. So then we look at stress. We have you wired the whole time. We log everything you do on your computer. So every single Windows switch you make, we actually look at that. How do I get rid of this window? Because I can't see my whole slides. Okay, and then at the end of the day, and sometimes at the beginning of the day, we'll ask you what you wanted to get accomplished. And at the end of the day, we'll ask you, well, how productive did you feel you were? Did you actually accomplish those tasks? So it's a pretty onerous thing for people to participate in this study. We also do experience sampling throughout the day. That's not mentioned here, but we do that just to check in with you how you feel, maybe 5 times a day. But we get a really holistic picture of the user, how long they work, how much they work, what they're doing while they work, and how they feel. So how bad is the focus stress problem really? It's pretty bad. If you ask users, they feel completely stressed out. They feel like they're constantly multitasking and task switching. Our latest estimate for how long you stay on any one window is about 40 seconds. I think it may even be a little bit shorter now. We haven't looked at this for a couple of years, but it's very short. All day, every work day, people are switching computer screens, tons and tons of the time. So we've seen in study after study that we've published mostly in CHI and CSCW, this constant multitasking and task switching, plus an overabundance of email, increases your stress. Email is the #1 stressor, and then I would say the multitasking is #2. And it decreases productivity. And all these things are now significantly worse due to COVID restrictions. We're working from home. Now we're in, sometimes 14 30-minute meetings a day with no breaks because, at the beginning of COVID, people didn't understand how to schedule meetings. And so the stress has peaked really dramatically, and it's a serious problem. Now, before COVID, we had done this profile of the rhythm of work for most people. So it kind of depends on when you come in the morning. So if you're a late night owl, you're probably going to come in a little later. So this would be shifted to the right for you. But if you're an early bird, this is what your profile probably looks like, because it's pretty true for everybody. You only really need to pay attention to that top line for now, because this comes from a paper where we looked at all kinds of things. But in terms of focus, it's the light blue line right underneath the black line. And basically what it's showing here is that you have 2 peaks, one mid-morning, one mid-afternoon. And this is because when you come to work, you kind of do what I call kind of not really important work. You look at email, you look at your calendar, you maybe read your news, depending on what news app you use. And then when you feel like you've gotten everything ready, then you start tackling your big problems for the day. And you get into a role, and then of course your cognitive resources become depleted. You can't stay focused 24/7. So you go have lunch. That used to be when we would have social time. That used to be when we might stretch our legs. I don't know if we're doing that so much anymore, which would be a real shame, because we've also done the research that shows that just walking a little bit actually makes you come back more creative. Then you go back to your desk, or you used to go back to your desk, and then you'd ramp up again for your second peak, which would be mid-afternoon. You'd do a bunch of really good focused work. And then of course your cognitive resources deplete again, and it's time to go home. And that used to be when we would break away and have family time. What I'm afraid of is now we have multiple peaks because of COVID, especially parents with small children. And they probably have a triple peak after they put the kids to bed, is my suspicion. So the rhythm of workday shows two things. People don't come to work ramped up and ready to go. And we used to have a little bit of a commute, so that helped. So we need a little ramp up time. And then you have your two peaks, maybe we have a third peak now, but you used to have a ramp down time, which was your commute, where you were able to go home. We've actually shipped a product now based on our double hump, our double peak day finding in Microsoft 365. We actually have a virtual commute now built into our products to try to help people unwind, get off their computer, and go have their personal time away from work. So the idea of virtual commute, if you ever see it in any of our products, is to give you this semblance of a separation between work and life, because right now it's just completely blurred. Since we did this research, this was all logging and self-reports, we have built our Sensei software platform, which automatically senses how people are feeling during the day. And so we don't have to keep bothering them and asking for experience sampling reports. And we saw the same exact thing, the double peak. So now it's nice because it's not invasive. We don't have to ask people all the time. We can sense this, and we can sense this 24/7 as long as you have your camera and your microphone turned on. And because we have this automatic sensing software, we've been able to do a couple things like work with the My Analytics team at Microsoft to deliver interventions based on users' affective state, hopefully in the future. We've also built a focus agent that helps you with your ramp up, your ramp down, and to take healthy breaks during the day. So it could be soon you will see software agents or chatbots that can help you stay on track and focus. And we'll be presenting that work at CHI and IUI. So what is Sensei? Sensei is this umbrella project that I've been mentioning that captures all of our sensing efforts and integrates them into this Sci framework. Sci is a really big multimodal sensing platform that is now free to the public, especially to academics. It's open source. And we have several instantiations of this to help people build on it, but contact me later if you're interested in Sci. Our component tree that went into Sci is presence and motion detection. So face detection, face tracking, we know your face pose. We have really excellent state-of-the-art heart rate and respiration and oxygen saturation sensing. And I'll talk a little bit more deeply about that in a second. We can look at your audio channels so we can see your language sentiment, your voice prosody, which carries tons of cues about stress because when you're stressed, your vocal cords tense. So we can see that in various characteristics of the audio channel. And we can look at expressions. Obviously, we won't know how you're actually feeling inside, but we can certainly see how you express your emotions outwardly to other people, just like if you were in the room. So we can see that, and we can see head gestures and hand gestures if they're in the camera. The head gestures turn out to be really important for things like head nods and head shakes. For consent or dissent. And then we can use peripherals like keyboards and mice because it turns out when you're stressed, you actually slam on the keyboard harder, etc. So we put all this together and we have this beautiful multimodal sensing platform. Obviously, text is included in there as well, even though I didn't list it here. I don't know
One
if
of
you're going
my
to be able to
main
hear this.
projects at the moment is focusing on physiological sensing. So we've been doing some work that will be published at NeurIPS in a few weeks, which is looking at building state-of-the-art heart and breathing sensing from the camera, putting that on mobile devices using TVM, which is a deep learning compiler, to optimize the performance and get high frame rates, but very accurate measurement as well of the pulse and respiration rate of the individuals.
I hope you heard that. Somebody speak up if you didn't, because I've got one more I want to play here.
Here are just some examples of videos inputs, and you can see there's a lot of head motion, which makes it challenging to extract the pulse signal. The blue signals reflect the ground truth, and the red are our predictions from our algorithm. And we've been able to reduce error in performance quite significantly using these approaches, both for measuring heart rate and respiration rate. And actually, we have a live webinar right now, which is capturing this work.
So Daniel McDuff is the lead on these sensing features that we've just incorporated into everything we're doing. And there is a webinar out there that's free for you to consume if you're interested in this area. He really is doing state-of-the-art work here, and had a really highly rated paper at NeurIPS on this topic. So we can leverage this in our software, and it helps with various things around detecting stress. So we've put all of these components into the Sci Platform, as I was discussing earlier. It is available open source and out there for academics and nonprofits to use for any kind of affect sensing, multimodal affect sensing you would like. And we built lots of applications on top of Sensei. As I mentioned, we had a focus agent. It was just a chat agent that you would talk to in the morning and might come up and remind you of tasks that you said were high priority. If it saw that you were sitting in social media for too long and you had told the agent you didn't want to be in social media, if you told the agent you wanted reminders for healthy breaks, the chatbot would remind you to take healthy breaks. But most importantly, and what worked really well, was that the agent would try to respond emotionally to you based on your emotion that the agent sensed through Sensei. That was a very successful project. And although it was a little ahead of its time for product right now, we're hoping that that will eventually work its way into product. We did a tool for usability researchers so that they could actually know how someone felt when they tested software on them instead of asking them how they felt, which is pretty nice. I'll be talking about Meeting Coach and Effective Spotlight shortly, but we have a lot of collaborations with a lot of other groups, like even with Steelcase and Office Design. They are interested in how people are feeling with the new designs. And we've been very successfully collaborating with folks who are doing accessibility, trying to make video calling more inclusive for people who are neurodiverse or have low vision or problems hearing. It's nice for them to know if they're on the autism spectrum, how people are feeling, how to read the room. It just makes it more accessible for them. And finally, I just want to note, although I won't be talking about it today, we have built a 3D embodied agent that you can talk to about anything, thanks to some collaboration we've had with our NLP group. And Marvin, you can see here in the lower left, is a very engaging person to talk to. We've been looking at things like linguistic style matching. So if the user speaks in a particular style or way, research has shown us that you tend to gravitate towards people who are more like yourself. So we've been experimenting with an agent that maybe speaks and behaves more like you, using mimicry and other kinds of style matching from the psycholinguistics literature. It actually works. The problem is the agent can't speak quickly enough. It's not performant enough for people who are highly interactive speakers and extroverts. The agent, because it has to look at your face, it has to figure out how you're feeling. It's got to hear what you said. It's got to figure out how you said it. And then it's got to go back and find the right response based on what you said to it. That all takes 2 seconds and it's just too slow. So we're working really hard on making that more performant, because there is evidence now in our 3 studies that we've done on this that users would prefer an agent that speaks the way they do and converses the way they do. All right, so let's move on to Meeting Coach, making meetings more inclusive and effective. Maybe before I do, I should see if there are any questions, since I can see no one in the room. I don't know if there are any questions. All right, I'm just going to move on. So making meetings more inclusive. It used to be, you know, when we all sat around a table, we were really close to each other. We saw how each other were dressed. We saw all kinds of things. So many cues that we don't get in the new meeting environment today. And even for the old days, when we were hybrid at least, there would be someone who was at a disadvantage if they were remote. So if you were a virtual attendee in a meeting, you still had to deal with what we're all dealing with today with these remote meetings, where you get so little cues and so little information about what's going on with a person, even how they're feeling. Doctors tell me they can't even tell how a patient is feeling the way they used to when the patient would walk into the room, or they'd walk into the room and they'd see the patient's whole body. So we're missing a lot of cues. So we asked people in a survey, and we always do this before we start a project, we do a survey asking people what the problem seems to be. And the problem really popped out in this pretty big survey we did about meetings, that social signals were really valued. Everybody says, you know, pretty much everybody agrees, this is very important to me, but they're just really hard to understand in an online meeting. And it's especially difficult when people don't turn on their cameras, which people increasingly are doing because they need to multitask. And we have a Chi paper on this year. The bigger the meeting and the more cameras are turned off, the much greater likelihood that everyone's doing something else and not paying attention to the meeting. But they have to do that because they're in meetings all day. And if they don't do that, they're not going to get anything done. So it's a horrible cycle. But we were hoping we could make meetings more inclusive, because not only do we know the social signals are important, but also in this survey, it was very clear that more inclusive meetings lead to more effective meetings. We've seen that now in a couple studies. So we took the signal from the survey of the kinds of features that we could use Sensei to detect that might help make meetings more effective. So one of the very first ones was just turn taking. So certainly we can detect when one person's talking and when the other person's talking. And here you can see this is a very genteel turn taking situation. Daniel and Samiha are not talking over each other. But that's an easy signal for us. Another easy signal for us is head nod versus head shake. It's very meaningful to see when people are in consensus or not. And it's a signal that could be very helpful to people who miss a meeting, but it could be very helpful to people who have a hard time understanding what was going on in a bigger meeting. 4 is maybe easy, but when you get past 9, maybe it's harder. So this is another very easy signal for us to collect. And then sentiment modulation. Obviously, our group does effective computing, so this is going to be something we're going to look at. And we have the transcript, but there are also, as you can see, many, many cues we can use to let us know what kind of sentiment is going on in the meeting. Again, we don't know for sure if this is how people were feeling, but we know this is how people projected they were feeling, and it's something that's easy for us to measure. So what did we do? So we designed a custom bot that we put in Teams, and it captures separated audio and video streams. So we do the face detection, then we pull out the sentiment from the face and the head gestures, and then we throw the video away. So in everything we do, we try to do as much processing on the user's own device as we possibly can. In this particular project, we don't throw away the meeting recording because everyone wants the meetings to be recorded, or at least at Microsoft, that's the way we normally operate. So we can't throw away the meeting recorded, but that was something everyone agreed to anyway. But when we're giving you back your sentiment signal, I'll just take a minute to explain this here. For privacy reasons, we would throw your video away. And same thing with your voice. We would pull out the voice activity. We would detect the sentiment, the turn taking, the timing of things, the transcription, and then we would normally throw the audio away. In the meeting scenario, we can't do that because people want the meeting recording. But in everything else we do, that's how we maintain your privacy. It's for your eyes only, and we only capture the sentiment. And so how we studied this was, we started with just some paper prototypes. Then we picked 8 teams who opted in. They weren't all co-located, not that anyone was in the same building. Some of them were in different countries. But it was 8 teams for 4 weeks who agreed to help us. And they each had weekly meetings. So we would do recordings of their weekly meetings over a period of 4 weeks. And the first time we recorded their meeting, we just showed them some paper prototypes and ideas. We had done interviews and surveys of them already. And eventually by the second week, we had an interactive dashboard that we started to test with them. And by the 3rd and 4th week, we actually had a real interactive prototype, which looked like this. On the left side, we show a pie chart of your participation compared to everybody else that was in the meeting. We only call you out by name. And then we give a suggestion, like, try to engage with others in this particular instance because this person wasn't very actively participating in the meeting. And we give them a suggestion why. These suggestions actually come from the literature as well as our own team's team who studies what makes effective and inclusive meetings. So we had several ideas for suggestions for participants based on their participation. And then just below that, we have their sentiments. So keep up the positivity because this person was showing a lot of positive sentiment during the meeting. And then below that, you'll see a bi-week histogram or line chart of their meeting history over time. People really liked this left side of the dashboard. And especially the history over time. They did appreciate that. In fact, they appreciated the suggestions so much that they said they would rather get the suggestions before they went into the next meeting as opposed to after the meeting was over. So this was a post-meeting dashboard. So for instance, right when you're waiting to get into a meeting, maybe that's the best time to get a suggestion for how to be more engaged or inclusive. So that's a cool thing that would be easy to implement. Then on the right-hand side, we have the actual video of the meeting, of course. We have the actual transcript of the meeting, just as you would if you had done a recording. But below that, we have the sentiment. And again, it's just you versus the rest of the team. So for your eyes only to kind of look at it and kind of wonder what was going on then that you maybe weren't so positively engaged. Then below that, we have where there was consensus. So again, to remind you, that was just head nods or head shakes. And you could, of course, click on any of these things and go right to that part of the meeting. You can see where questions were asked, which is really helpful if you were the leader of the meeting or if you were trying to launch a new project or if you missed the meeting and you wanted to know where there was confusion. People really liked that. And then finally, we have the speaking turns. So you can kind of see who was talking over whom, or at least who was talking at the same time as whom. Sometimes this is a problem. Sometimes it's not. So if you're a highly interactive speaker, you actually like it when people are jumping in and talking at the same time as you. To you, that means everyone's super excited about what you're talking about and engaged. Other times when it's just one person talking over everybody, that can be a problem. But again, it's for your eyes to look at how your performance is and how you're doing. So this is just a bigger picture of all of that. As I said, the people in the 8 teams saw this actual dashboard based on their real data from their meetings after the 3rd and 4th weeks that we studied them. So we got some feedback on it, but we never got to see if it actually changed their behavior. We didn't have enough time. This was Samiha's internship last summer. If we could have had a couple more weeks, we might have actually seen behavior change in the data, but that remains future work. But as you can see from the Likert scale ratings in terms of positive versus negative that came out of the prototype on a 7-point scale, for a first iteration of a meeting coach, this actually scored quite well. And the thing I was the most happy about was it said it would improve people's awareness of how they were behaving in the meeting. And it was actually, they felt like it was going to make the meetings more inclusive, which is great. I love the comment here that I'm caught between assessing current dashboard. Many of the items shown are not actionable, but the potential of the dashboard, which is huge. So obviously this person wanted more actionable feedback about their participation in meetings. But I think this has some real potential. Interestingly enough, there is a meeting coach project going on at Microsoft. So let's see if we can get some of these features into that. So in the summary, people said it's needed. We should send those suggestions for participation and inclusive behavior before the meetings, not after the meetings. And the insights definitely were useful after the meeting, but a longitudinal study where we actually see if there's behavior change is what's needed now to really complete this project and hopefully get this stuff shipped. So now I'm gonna switch over to Effective Spotlight. This was born out of a product need where the situation I'm facing right now, where I have no clue if you guys are following what I'm saying or if you're all just on your phones multitasking. I have no clue. And we all like to think that, you know, the audience in front of us looks like this. But in fact, today, the audience looks worse than this. There, at least you have an indication that there are a couple people that left the room. I can't see anybody right now. So I can't change my presentation. I can't slow it down, pick it up, make it funnier. I just have no feedback. So using many of the same things we've talked about in Sensei, we went ahead and built a spotlight on the audience that was based on audience room behaviors. So if people have their cameras turned on, we can start to send audience video streams to Azure, find a face in the audience that's actually active. So we look at the facial expressions, the head gestures again. We extract those features from the frames and we compute a spotlight score. And the person who scores the highest in the audience, that means they're moving around the most, they're gesturing the most, they're smiling or not the most, maybe they're frustrated, frowning. And we pick that person and we show that person to the presenter next to their slides. So to the right of this slide, you see I was picked as the spotlight. It's only for 15 seconds. And then the spotlight, the effective spotlight will move to someone else. So we try not to keep showing the same person over and over. And we don't show the speaker, obviously. And we of course, surveyed presenters at Microsoft and asked them what kind of cognitive states would they like to have a spotlight select. And interestingly, they didn't want to know if people were tired and falling asleep during their talk, but they did want to know if people were confused or engaged or excited or surprised or happy. And so we picked the things that were easy for us to measure out of that set of things. And you can see in the orange here, it's the things that we can see quite easily with Sensei: laughing, frowning, smiling, head shaking, head nod, and speaking. And so we used that to pick the effective spotlight. And we ran a study. Again, this will be a Chi paper in May. We'll be presenting. We had 117 participants, 14 different groups of 8 people. We picked one person from the 8 people to give 3 5-minute talks in our 3 conditions, which were the affective spotlight condition, where you would see this person who was pretty engaged in whatever you were presenting. We picked a random spotlight condition where we just picked a random face from the audience, not based on their behaviors. And then we just had a baseline condition that was regular Microsoft Teams. And what we found was that not only was there increased ease of use, satisfaction, and an indication that you would want to use something like this in the future in the effective spotlight condition, but there was really interestingly an increased awareness of how you were performing as a speaker. And this was especially true for novice speakers. So it was easier for them to see how the audience was responding to their speech and how they were doing. Not only that, they actually changed their behavior. So we saw speakers speed up, we saw speakers slow down, we saw speakers repeat things or ask questions of the audience that they wouldn't have done in, for instance, the baseline or the random conditions. The other thing for the novice speakers was that it reduced their presentation anxiety, which was awesome. So we're really trying very hard to ship this in Teams because I just think it's badly needed. And in fact, some people told us they wanted more than one spotlight. And there's no reason why you would just have to have one spotlight. You should be able to have as many spotlights as you want. So I thought that went really well. So the last project I'm going to present, I just wanted to end on a mental health note because of COVID and because of the dramatic increase in mental health issues since the pandemic, we can sense stress and we will be able to do just-in-time interventions in the workplace. But the way you do that really matters, right? We don't want to be patronizing, and we certainly don't want to stress you out more by having some chatbot pop up at an inopportune time and try to get you to do some deep breathing. So we have actually built pretty psychologically valid technical solutions for mental health. And I'm just going to focus on one called Pocket Skills. And this was an interesting project because Dr. Marcia Linehan, she was at the University of Washington, she's since retired. She reached out to me because she had invented a therapy called dialectical behavior therapy, or DBT. Many people know CBT. DBT is just a little bit more complicated than CBT. She knew it was the #1 therapy for suicide prevention, and she knew how many people needed it but couldn't get access to it. There are also very few trained DBT licensed psychologists out there. So for all these reasons, Marcia reached out to me and said, could you, Microsoft, bring this to the masses? And so we took 2 years to build it. This was about 2 years ago now, or maybe not quite 2 years yet. I see it was yet 2020. We're working on it. But we built DBT into a very easy to use and quite engaging, in my personal opinion, app on your phone where you basically have therapy with Marcia, but she's eMarcia. She's just a chat bot. And actually the chat bot wasn't that intelligent. It just asked you the same kinds of questions you would be asked in therapy, but then it parroted back your responses. So it sounded like the chatbot was listening to you. But it also, as you can see here on the right-hand side of the screen, would ask you to do ratings of things so that the system could be smart about where you felt you were in a series of progressions through this DBT therapy. In DBT, you kind of have to go through stages, and you can't go to, let's say, emotion regulation phase until you finish the mindfulness phase. So you start with basics and then you move on to more and more complicated skills. That's why it's called pocket skills, because it's in your pocket. It was very, very well liked, and people said it was extremely easy to use. These suicidal people, by the way, these were all clinically diagnosed suicidal patients. Some had borderline personality disorder, which is very, very hard to treat, but others just had generalized anxiety or depression. We had over 80 start the study, 73 finished. All of them got better. So this is huge to me. In some cases, based on the OASIS scale, the PHQ-9 scale, and just how many skills they were using, in some cases, these women and men improved over 4 weeks. And so it was clinically efficacious. We had Chelsea Wilkes, Marcia's PhD student, working with us at the time. But what was lovely about this, and this was a study that Jessica Schroeder ran, is that as these patients used pocket skills over time, they started to see, and we learned this through discussions with them, that they could whip their phone out of their pocket and they didn't have to call their therapist. They didn't have to call a family member or a loved one. They could actually solve a problem by practicing a skill on their own. And once they saw that they could do that and that it actually helped make them feel better, they built self-efficacy, and that made them want to use the application more. And so we were able to treat some really hard to treat patients in the spaces between going to their therapists. we know from the therapists that most patients don't do their homework in between therapy sessions. So what Pocket Skills was able to do, and we were able to see that they were doing this because we had access to their data and their usage frequency on our, we had access to their usage frequencies. We saw that they were using it at least once a day and actually learning new skills, which was awesome. So I think now that we can do stress detection, we can actually start bringing some of these skills into our products in a just-in-time intervention way. And I'm super excited about the partnerships we've got going on now with Windows, with Office, with Workplace Analytics, where we can start to get some mental health or at least stress-reducing coping skills and suggestions into Microsoft products. And on that, I'll just close by saying effective computing has been abused. Back in 2015, when this, Gartner hype cycle thing emerged, effective computing was still not quite on the cusp of being put out there, but now it is being put out there, and people are using effective computing for horrible things, for entry into universities, for job interviews. And the hype is way bigger than what these companies can actually do. And it's quite troubling. And so what you'll see out there is a lot of these really hyped up claims about emotion recognition and AI and effective computing in general. And I would say it's the people who are doing these kinds of applications that are giving effective computing a bad name. There are algorithmic biases, there's abuse of the terminology, there's confusion about facial recognition versus effective computing, and there's just a lack of proper calibration and not a big enough acknowledgement about the risk of harm. So my team, I'm very proud of them, have been doing all kinds of things to, one, reduce the bias in the machine learning. Javier in particular on my team, but also Daniel has been working in this area. And then we've worked as a group to reposition Microsoft products so that they don't make overly ambitious claims where they can't possibly do what was sometimes originally being claimed. So we've worked hard on the way we describe our projects now. I think you heard me say, we can never know how someone's feeling. We cannot. We can just know the projections, their facial action unit projections of how they want you to perceive them. That's all we know. And so we need to talk about emotion recognition that way. And then together with many partners in the product teams and the Office of Responsible AI at Microsoft, we've been working on emotion AI ethics and guidelines. So we've been writing papers both internally and externally on the appropriate uses of this kind of technology for social good, and working with a woman in the partnership on AI on a nice piece that we can get out there, kind of to counter some of this really negative press that's going on out there. Not that there shouldn't be cause for alarm in some of this, but we want to make sure that it's a balanced discussion. And hopefully you'll be seeing some of our work around workplace stress get into Microsoft product. We're uniquely positioned because we have so many products that people use throughout the day, whether it's from Xbox to Teams to Cortana. And we think there are lots of cool ways we can do stress interventions and well-being suggestions to help everybody on the planet be their best selves. And with that, I will stop and take questions. Thank you very much for your attention.